There are engines that are more than just mechanical parts. They carry a spirit, a purpose, and sometimes even a rivalry. The Ford Boss 302 is one of those engines. Just hearing the name brings back the roar of a Mustang Boss 302 charging down the road, raw and untamed. But to me, it has always been more than that. It's a reminder of a time when American car makers would stop at nothing to prove their dominance on the track. The first time I heard a Boss 302 come to life, it wasn't a smooth, polished sound meant for a casual cruise. It was rough, raspy, and almost aggressive, like the engine was daring the driver to push harder. And maybe that's what makes it so magnetic. You sense immediately that this engine is different, unwilling to compromise, and it leaves you wondering, why did Ford build something like this in the first place? In this video, we're going to look back in time to search for that answer. Number 1. Born just to beat the Chevy Z/28. By the late 1960s, the Trans Am series had become a battleground for American muscle. The same cars you could buy at a dealership, Mustang, Camaro, Javelin, Barracuda, were thrown against each other in brutal fights for glory. Chevrolet launched the Camaro Z/28 with its high-revving 302 V8, compact yet fierce. It was quick, agile, and cast a long shadow over the competition. For Ford, that shadow was unacceptable. The Mustang had sparked the pony car craze, but if it couldn't win on the track, it risked losing its crown on the street. I can almost picture Ford's engineers staring at Chevy's Z/28 and thinking, we need something that fits under 5 liters, but that absolutely dominates at high RPM. The result was the Boss 302. Ford started with the familiar 302 Windsor block, but refused to stop there. They bolted on Cleveland heads with massive intake ports, a design meant purely for breathing at maximum performance. Reading old documents, I can feel that intent. This engine wasn't built to cruise downtown, it was built to scream past 5,000 RPM, where races were decided. Number 2, Windsor block meets Cleveland heads. If there's one element that truly sets the Boss 302 apart from ordinary small blocks, it's the strange marriage of the Windsor block with Cleveland heads. The 302 Windsor block was familiar, compact, and relatively easy to build. But on its own, it wasn't enough to dethrone Chevy's Z/28. Ford needed something bolder. The answer came in the cylinder heads of the 351 Cleveland, heads with enormous intake and exhaust ports, almost overkill for a 5-liter engine. The first time I saw the design, I wondered, why would anyone bolt something built for big block breathing onto a small block? But that's where Ford's genius showed. The hybrid allowed the Boss 302 to breathe freely at high RPM, right where Trans Am victories were decided. On the street, many owners complained that the engine felt weak at low revs, but for those who dared to push it past 5,000 RPM, the Boss 302 transformed into an entirely different animal, fierce, raw, and razor-sharp. To me, the Windsor-Cleveland combination was Ford's act of defiance. Instead of sticking with safe, proven formulas, they gambled on a radical hybrid, and in doing so, created one of the most memorable crossbred engines in American muscle car history. Number 3, more powerful than advertised. When Ford announced the Boss 302 at just 290 horsepower, a lot of people raised their eyebrows. How could an engine built to fight Trans Am battles put out numbers barely above an ordinary small block? I remember seeing that figure in an old brochure and thinking the same. But the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This was Ford playing a clever game. On the dyno, real-world Boss 302s often produced between 360 and 380 horsepower, sometimes even more with careful tuning. Racers knew it, mechanics knew it, and anyone who dared to push one past 6,000 RPM felt it instantly. One Mustang Boss 302 owner once described the experience. At 6,000, it stopped feeling like a street car and turned into something wild. It was like the engine had been holding back, waiting to unleash itself. So why the low rating? Insurance companies were punishing muscle cars with higher premiums the moment numbers looked too aggressive. By rating it at 290, Ford kept the Boss 302 under the radar. It looked manageable on paper, but behind the wheel, it was anything but. And that feeling of knowing your car was far stronger than the badge claimed is what helped make the Boss 302 legendary. Number 4. Special parts that made the Boss 302 a rarity. One little-known fact about the Boss 302 is that it wasn't just unique because of its Windsor Cleveland design. It also came with a host of specialized components built specifically for this engine. It used a forged crankshaft, heavy-duty connecting rods, high-compression pistons, and dual-valve springs, all to withstand the brutal high RPM demands of Trans Am racing. I remember flipping through an old Ford parts catalog that clearly noted Boss 302 parts are Boss only. That struck me. Even within the small block family, the Boss 302 stood apart. You couldn't simply swap in parts from a 289 or a 351 Windsor. This made it stronger, yes, but also far more complicated to maintain. Today, that uniqueness has turned the Boss 302 into a collector's dream. Owners of 1969 to 1970. Mustangs often talk about the challenge of tracking down the correct pistons, original heads, or even the proper carburetor setup. But that chase, that sense of holding something rare, is part of the thrill. Owning a Boss 302 means holding a piece of history that can't easily be replicated. Number 5. A temperamental engine for a select few. From the moment it debuted, it split opinions. Racers adored it, but casual Mustang buyers who wanted a street cruiser often ended up frustrated. The reason was simple. This engine only came alive at high RPM. At low revs, the Boss 302 could feel sluggish, even weaker than what you'd expect from a V8. I once heard someone describe driving it around town as like handling a beast half asleep, but push the tach past 5,000 and everything changed. The engine roared awake, the car lunged forward with raw aggression, and in that instant, you understood exactly why it existed, for Trans Am glory, not for Main Street comfort. This trait, though, made the Boss 302 a picky companion. It demanded patience, knowledge, and a willingness to play by its rules. If you wanted a smooth, easygoing V8 for daily driving, this wasn't your car. But if you learned how to wake it up at the right moment, the experience was unmatched, raw, violent, and unforgettable. Number 6. Why it was killed off. What makes the Boss 302 even more fascinating is how short its life was. Produced for just 2 years, 1969 and 1970, it disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. But its end had nothing to do with lack of power or failure on the track. In fact, it was the opposite. The Boss 302 had already fulfilled its mission brilliantly. Once the Mustang had proven itself against the Camaro Z/28 in Trans Am, Ford had to face more practical realities. Building the Boss 302 was expensive. Marrying a Windsor block with Cleveland heads wasn't simple. Meanwhile, everyday buyers weren't lining up. Many complained it was difficult to drive, only waking up at high RPM, while feeling tame or even awkward in city driving. By the early 1970s, the market's mood had shifted. Drivers wanted bigger engines with easier street manners. Ford quickly pivoted to the Boss 351, a fresh powerhouse that matched both racing needs and customer expectations. I often think Ford saw the Boss 302 as a temporary weapon, brought out only when Chevy needed to be checked, and retired once its job was done. Number 7, a surprising revival in 2012. Many believed the Boss 302 was forever locked in the pages of the late 1960s, but more than 4 decades later, Ford stunned the car world. In 2012, the Boss 302 name was reborn on the modern Mustang platform. And it wasn't just a badge, it was a full-scale attempt to resurrect the original spirit. The modern Boss 302 was powered by a specially tuned 5.0-liter Coyote V8. Ford reworked the camshafts, improved airflow, and recalibrated the ECU to let the engine scream past 7,500 RPM. The result was 444 horsepower, a figure that proved the Boss 302's high-revving character had survived into the 21st century. I remember reading a road test where a journalist wrote, "This isn't just a powerful Mustang, this is a Mustang built for the track." Ford didn't stop with the engine. They introduced the Boss 302 Laguna Seca Edition, an ultra-focused package with stiffer suspension, track-ready shocks, Recaro seats, and even the rear seats removed to cut weight. The first time I saw pictures of it, I couldn't help but think of the old Trans Am Warriors, pure, uncompromising, built for speed above all else. The Ford Boss 302 was never built to please everyone. It was created with one mission: to beat Chevy's Z/28 in Trans Am racing. And in its short lifespan, it left a mark that few engines could rival. From its hybrid Windsor-Cleveland design, to its underrated power figures, to its demanding high-rev nature, the Boss 302 was never an ordinary small block. Even when it was killed off after just 2 years, the name lived on among enthusiasts. And when Ford revived it in 2012, the world was reminded that legends may go quiet, but they never truly die. To me, the Boss 302 is a symbol of courage, an engine that dared to be different, fought its battle, and stepped aside with dignity once its mission was complete. But what about you? Do you see the Boss 302 as a racing warrior worth remembering, or just a short-lived experiment? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel for more shocking stories about classic cars and engines.